What comes up in the margins when people have got to Zoom up there, so we listening quite about.
I think it's good. All prayers. You need to pray nowadays.
We're now live.
Hello and Happy New Year and welcome to this meeting of the Windsor and Ascot Development Management Committee on the 9th of January. My name is Councillor Neil Knowles and I shall be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. First, it would be useful if the committee members and officers could introduce themselves so the public are aware of who is here in this meeting and the role they're undertaking. You've already heard from me, so I shall pass it to the right.
Councillor Mark Wilson, Vice Chair of the panel.
Councillor Julian Teasey, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Devon Davis, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Alison Carpenter, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Carol de Costa, voting member of the panel.
Councillor David Buckley, voting member of the panel. Good evening, everyone. Councillor Julian Sharp, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Sanora Luxton, voting member of the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Kim Woodley, Democratic Services Officer. I'll be clerking this meeting.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nick Westlake, Principal Planning Officer.
Good evening. My name is Louise Reid and I am Deputy Head of Planning.
And joining via Zoom, we have Katrina, joining us via Zoom, who is the legal advisor to the panel. She's up there at the moment, so she hasn't turned on the microphone at the moment. So that the public are aware, various councillors who have not specifically asked to introduce themselves may also be attending this meeting virtually via Zoom. This is, however, in an observing capacity only, as there was no right for councillors who are not members of the committee who have not formally registered to speak in advance to play an active role in the meeting this evening. The attendance of any councillors in this capacity shall be reflected via the member attendance records once the meeting has concluded. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite them to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. And also I may ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the consultation to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. We shall now start on the agenda items. Apologies for absence.
No apologies, Chair.
Lovely way to start the new year. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Item number 3 in that case is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of December as a true and accurate record. Are we all agreed? Great. That's carried therefore. We now move on to the one item for consideration this evening, agenda item 4, which is the proposal 131 to 133 Peascod Street, Windsor, SO4 1DW, which is the outline application for access, appearance, layout and scale, only to be considered at this stage, with all other matters to be reserved for the redevelopment of the site to retain the 2 existing commercial units and to provide an additional 3 commercial units Class C and 21 serviced apartments Class C1. We have 1 registered speaker this evening, so I shall invite Mr. Tim Matthews. Am I doing this the right way around? No, I need Nick to speak. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done this. You must excuse me. I'll ask Nick now to present the application in itself, which I think is quite an interesting one, to be honest, knowing the history of the original building years ago. Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. To share my screen. Okay, this is item 1, as Councillor Knowles indicated. The address is 131 to 133 Peascod Street in Windsor, and the proposal is an outline application for access, appearance, layout, scale only, to be considered at this stage, with all other matters to be reserved for future application. The application involves the redevelopment of the ground floor 2 existing commercial units and provision of 3 additional Class E commercial units. There are 21 proposed service departments, Class C1, at the first and floors above. Landscaping is reserved for future reserved matters. There's updates first. There is a minor change to the recommendation in relation to term including but not limited to being introduced to the recommendation for the 278 highway works. There's a typo in the application that refers to landscaping being used, being assessed as part of this application. That is not the case. That is detailed in the update report sheet. That is at 5.1, so that is an error. Landscaping is not included as part of this application. The local planning authority has received a no objection response from Natural England, and they've also undertaken, or we have also undertaken, an appropriate assessment in accordance with the habitats regulation standards. There are some minor typographical errors in the report, but they're all detailed in the update sheet. Nothing of substance, so I'll move on. Key material considerations for this application are the National Planning Policy Framework, December 2024, the Borough Local Plan 2022, Supplementary Planning Guidance of particular references to the Borough-wide Design Guide 2022, and also the Listed Building and Conservations Act 1990. That speaks of preserving and enhancing conservation areas and also preserving listed buildings and their settings. That's a statutory duty for undertakers to consider when making a decision. So the application is located in the town centre of Windsor, and it's outlined here before you in red. Peascod Street, the main shopping street, or one of the main shopping streets within Windsor, is to the south, Goswell Street to the north, and it runs to the east of this host site as well. You can see to the top of the screen, Windsor and Eton Central Station is nearby. Constraints map. Internally, the red line again is showing the site. It's not allocated for a specific use within the borough local plan. It's within the primary retail location of Windsor and also a primary shopping frontage. It's within the conservation area of Windsor Town Centre. It's flood zone 1, and it's within the historic core town centre as defined by the borough local plan. External to the site in purple, these are grade 2 listed buildings. The yellow indicates non-designated heritage assets. That includes Goswell Hill, the road, which is a cobbled street, shows the photographs shortly. And there are 3 nightclubs in close proximity to the host site. So this is the location plan. The overall area is 906 square metres. It's approximately 17 metres wide on the Peascod Street elevation and 70 metres in length. Some images of the site. Top left, this is, if you look in the map itself shows you with the direction of where these images are taken. So number 1 is looking up Goswell Hill, and what we're looking at there effectively is the rear of the host site that is actually given over to parking and bin storage. Number 2 shows looking down Goswell Hill northwards. The building on the immediate right, that is the Labyrinth nightclub, and there is a further nightclub further downhill, just around the corner of that first bend. And number 3 is again looking down the hill, and this is the upper floors of which there are no residential dwellings opposite. Number 1 shows on this slide closer towards Peascod Street, still within Goswell Hill. There's bars, shops at ground floor, and there's also a hotel entrance at ground floor for the Goswell Hill Hotel. Number 2 denotes the actual entrance to that hotel on the left-hand side. You can see the cobbled street before you. And number 3 is the first image of the front of the allocation site, the host site. And say it's a fairly nondescript building, brick built, circa 1970s. Final slides of photos, top left, again, front of the site from Peascod Street, slightly different angle further down the road. Number 2 shows the entrance to Goswell Hill from Peascod Street, and number 3 is an image towards the Windsor Royal Town Station Shopping Centre. So the proposal again is for appearance, layout, access to scale only. The C1 use that is proposed is a use as a hotel or as a boarding house where no significant element of care is provided. This definition excludes hostels, which is a sui generis use. With regards to sustainability, the building itself proposed, all the buildings, it uses a fabric first approach, improves U values, reduces thermal bridging, air tightness, etc. There are air source heat pumps used, solar panels on the roof. There's a total saving 37% on building regs part L, and the carbon offset is £104,000. The image at the bottom there on the left-hand side shows the proposed, how it would look for Peascod Street, and the image on the right is the existing. So southern elevation, this is to show you appearance and scale predominantly. The bottom image obviously shows the existing. The top image shows the proposed. There is a slope on Peascod Street, and the building is deemed to be proportionate in height. There's obviously large shop fronts at ground floor, and sash windows at first. So this is an image showing you the scale of the building in relation to Peascod Street, Goswell Hill, proportionate all the way along the road as you go down Goswell Hill to the other buildings on site. This is the northeastern elevation facing Goswell Hill. Effectively, this image is the elevation between the 2 yellow lines in the map on the top right. So you can see the 2 yellow lines coming in. That effectively is what we are looking at to the top of that screen. Bottom of the screen, the existing, that's what we currently have. So it's not a dramatic difference in height, but one can see the difference. Again, this is a scale drawing showing you where there is a recessed element. In blue, that is the proposed building, and the bottom of the screen shows you the existing block plan on the right hand side, and on the left hand side the proposed block plan. So you can see the build form is increasing along Goswell Hill slightly. Again, the image on the plan with the 2 yellow lines, this shows you the location of the north elevation between those 2 yellow lines, and there is a recessed courtyard area. There is a turning area at lower ground floor, bin storage locations. This is some CGIs to give you an idea of what materiality we're looking at, sent to us by the applicant. There's going to be a red-orange brick used on the ground floor, and then render at first floor. The windows are set within stone surrounds, and there are some balconies present. This is looking down Goswell Hill. This is effectively on the left-hand side. That is the entrance to where the 3 shops would be, and the courtyard area, proportionate in height to the building opposite. There's a couple more scale drawings, and this is taken from the south, looking north. And the summary in this regard is that it's a reduction in scale from an application, very similar application made in 2003, on the request of the Conservation Officer. Conservation Officer sees the lower end of less than substantial harm. However, this can be mitigated through the use of conditions. And in any event, the public benefit of the scheme is considered to be significantly outweighing the harm. There are no public objections received, and the residential impact on amenity, noise and light levels is deemed acceptable. On this latter point, just got some slides on residential amenity, mindful of the uses down on that road. So this is an impact on light in terms of how it would affect buildings opposite. So opposite the site, this is from the Goswell House Hotel website. You can see the arrow shows you that entire stretch of the first, second and third floor is part of the hotel. So there's no C3 residential units there. The ground floors are obviously shops, and there's a hairdresser and a bar there, which becomes a nightclub later in the evening. With regards to local activities, the noise impact in particular, there has been a very comprehensive noise assessment submitted with the application. The assessment has concluded that with windows shut on post application, with building fabric being of sufficient calibre, the impact will be minimal for those using the hotel. The agent of change principle is relevant here. It's paragraph 200 of the new NPPF. This provides an emphasis on new entrants to the area to provide mitigation to their designs rather than having any impact on the surrounding neighbourhood. Therefore, this should have no impact on the existing nightclub activities. Access, as there's no parking on site, there are 32 cycle spaces. There is room for a delivery van, which is shown on the right hand side, and it can turn in and out of that access point. There's a private refuge being proposed. There's a new pavement to the front of the site, drop curb, wheelchair access, and also there is a legal agreement covering other section 278 requirements such as drop curbs. So the plan view, this is effectively where the courtyard area is, the shops. This is second floor, first floor over the existing retail, showing you some of the internal layouts of the 21 service departments. Third floor, all of the apartments are of a size equal to or above NDSS standards. And this is the roof plan. There are some solar panels on the roof and air source heat pumps. Penultimate slide, the lack of car parking is notable. However, there are 6 car parks locally within 8 minutes walk. It's a total of 1,557 spaces available locally within 8 minutes. As I said, 32 cycle spaces. There's a railway station 2 minutes walk away with regular service to London, and there are 5 bus routes on site. So, in conclusion, the application is deemed subject to planning condition and a signed legal agreement. There would be no statutory or non-statutory objectors to the scheme. The application adheres to the borough local plan policies and the NPPF. The public benefits to the scheme would significantly and demonstrably outweigh any less than substantial harm to the conservation area and nearby listed buildings. The recommendation is to approve the development as set out in section 11 of the report, an update sheet. This includes the signing of a legal agreement and the imposition of planning conditions listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Now we shall invite our one speaker of this evening, Mr. Tim Matthews of Sorbonne Estates. Step forward, please. As usual, press the red button and you have the time, and 1 minute warning will be given by Miss Moody. Just a look of alarm on your faces when I said for 1 hour.
Okay,
So,
good evening.
When you're ready, Tim.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Tim Matthews of Sorbonne Estates, and the applicant to the subject application. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I understand there's no objections to our proposal, so I'll keep this fairly brief. Following the withdrawal of previous application, we have made a number of amendments responding to officer comments. This has included reducing the height and massing of the new build block along the lower part of Goswell Hill and ensuring our proposals align with all policies as set out in the local plan. Our development will make best use of this prominent, previously developed site within the town centre, whilst ensuring long-term viability. We believe this is an exciting opportunity to greatly enhance and improve both Peascod Street and Goswell Hill, while significantly improving both the commercial retail offering and providing much needed short stay accommodation with the subsequent economic benefits this creates for the town. I'd also like to acknowledge the active engagement and helpful dialogue with the case officer, who, as you'll note, has recommended this application for approval. I would therefore ask, in line with the officer's recommendation, that the committee vote in support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. It's now time that we open the floor to any questions or points people wish to make. Councillor De Costa.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a couple of comments, but before I do that, I just want to say that I have no view on this application one way or the other. I'm not for it or against it at this moment in time. So the first thing I want to say is that we keep getting outline plans come to panel, and I recall last year being told by one of the senior planning officers that it was a rare thing, and it doesn't seem to be. So I personally do not like outline planning applications coming to us, because I think we need to look at everything holistically, and we're getting piecemeal planning applications at the moment. And personally, I feel that leads to poor planning decisions. So I'm just going to put that out there, because I feel that it's a statement that needs to be made, because this is the third one in as many months, and we were told they were rare. The second point that I want to make is parking for disabled travellers and visitors to the accommodations. The comment was that it's an 8-minute walk to the nearest car park. Well, I, for one, as a disabled person, cannot walk 8 minutes. And so I'd like to know what provision is being made for anybody that has poor mobility. And we're not talking about wheelchair users, I'm talking about people with poor or low mobility. So I'd like to have both of those answered. Thank you very much.
And we have addressed those questions recently.
Yes, thank you, Councillor De Costa. I think on the first point, in relation to this being an outline planning application, I mean, it is effectively a full application with all matters included other than landscaping. So there are 5 reserved matters that make up a full application. And what we have here is access, appearance, layout and scale, with the only element not included is landscaping. So we've got the majority of a full application, but it is classified as an outline because it doesn't encompass everything. With regards to parking or lack of parking, well, unfortunately, there is no parking for the disabled person if they are arriving by car. I think what I would say is that equally the hotel opposite has got no parking. There are other examples in Windsor and Maidenhead and in Travel Lodge, although, for instance, the Travel Lodge is possibly better located for people potentially dropping off immediately next door. But it's undeniable that the host site or the proposed before you doesn't have any parking facilities. That is a judgment that you need to reach in the balance as to whether you think that that is sufficiently harmful to sway your decision when it comes to the vote.
And I think you were implying, weren't you, that it was around DDA access as well?
Yeah.
About the two things of where they're compatible or not.
But there will be wheelchair access, there will be a ramp access, so there will be no stairs for people in wheelchairs to navigate. It will be accessed via a ramp to courtyard area. There are other section 278 works that talk of there being a drop curb on the adjacent footpath from the cobbled street itself. So one would be able to access the courtyard without any particular difficulty. But as for physically parking there, unfortunately that isn't available.
Okay, can I just come back to that? So basically what we're saying is this really, because you're talking about coming up a cobbled road in a wheelchair, because the only way you can get in is by a wheelchair, because if you can't walk that far, you can't walk that far. So what we're saying is this is really an accommodation that's not suitable for people with poor mobility. And I just wonder how that sits with our equality. To me, it doesn't feel very comfortable. And coming back to you on the outline application, why are we accepting outline applications if they're almost a full application? Why are we not waiting till it's a full application?
Yeah, do you want to, Louise? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor De Costa. I mean, ultimately, these planning applications are a fairly costly exercise for the applicant. And one of the reasons why an outline application is submitted in the first instance is that you pay per 0.1 hectare, and therefore the overall fee you submit at the outline stage is far less for the applicant. When they get, if they get their outline permission, they then pay the remainder they would have paid on a full application on the reserved matters submission. So it's a fairly established principle. I don't know whether my colleague Mr. Reid has got any comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Just to clarify, it's quite, outline applications are quite common with larger schemes. They're not unusual. They are unusual for small schemes, a couple of houses or similar. But where you've got a bigger scheme, even if it's a medium-sized major such as this, it would be quite common to have an outline for the reason that Nick suggested. Furthermore, I have to remind members that we need to consider what's submitted to us. And if the applicant makes the decision to use the outline process, that is their right to do so. We shouldn't be prejudicing because of the type of application they're submitting. We should be considering what they have submitted. In this case, it's really far more helpful than usual with outlines where you have maybe just access or whatever, because here you have pretty much all the reserved matters bar landscaping. And my understanding is that the reason with the landscaping is that the landscaping is fairly limited here, and they wanted to focus on that once they felt more confident about that the development was acceptable. So that's really why it's been reserved, was because the area is quite limited. They are proposing, I think, trees and so on for the landscaping, but that doesn't form part of the scheme in front of you tonight.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions actually. It's quite a narrow passage down there, and if you have a massive fire, only one fire brigade can go in down there. And to turn, if they have to go to refill like 2 or 3, it's quite tight, that particular area. So that to me is a big concern. There's so much residents and so much, it's a commercial area, it's pretty full on that area. I think we got to look into that, especially the way how things get on over there. The fires in Windsor, when it happened to the castle and all, there was space, but in this particular area, it's very tight. The other thing question I have is, I know is recently we seem to have, I've got nothing against cycling or cyclists, but we seem to have a lot of parking spaces for cyclists. I can't see how people come on a bicycle with their luggage to go in a hotel or to stay in a residence. So why are we having so many cycle spaces? Why can't we have like a handicap space or something? That's my question. Thank you.
If we can.
Thank you, Councillor Luxton. Well, with regards to fire access, the situation is that people, well, you can access the site. Obviously, cars are there. You access the site from Charles Street, I believe, and you go underneath the built form to the north, and then you emerge effectively where the nightclub is. So that would still be available for the fire brigade. Fire brigade have been consulted twice on this. They've offered no objection. Building regulations Part B requires them to, if you like, outfit the building acceptably, and that's a statutory requirement. So they will have no way of not doing that. with regards to, and also our highway department have looked into this, but I think possibly more importantly, the fire department themselves haven't written back to us and said that this is a problem for X, Y, Z reason. Still travel up the road to work near to Peascod Street, and that access turning point would be available for fire engine to use. It may require more than a 3-point turn, but it would be there. So we will ensure that they will have a key, the emergency services. So from our perspective, there are no statutory consultancy objectives, and that's what we're guided by on an issue such as that. I believe we've consulted the right people. In terms of the cycle spaces, well, this is being provided not just for the hotel users, but also for the people who work in the shop. And yes, I accept what you're saying. There is a large number, but that is certainly to encouraging sustainable transport, sustainable movements. There isn't, as we see it, enough room to have a disabled car parking space and obviously all of the cycle spaces. But we've made the decision based on highway feedback that what we've provided is suitable for this location.
Chair, can I come back? Chair, can I come back on that, please? Thank you.
Go ahead.
It still doesn't make sense, 32 cycles, and yet people, if they want to come to a hotel or to stay, to drop their luggage, it is a car. You need some place where you can unload, load, and that would be your front entrance to reception. And say, my question to you is, if you have got such a big accommodation thing down there, the hotel and residents and shops and all, nobody comes on a bicycle to take their shopping. I mean, this is just, I don't understand. You've got 32 cycle paths. So I think we should look into this and have some sort of, at least for a drop off for disabled or something, take a few spaces off of the cycles. That's reasonable, I think, asking. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think all I would say to that is that if you were in a car, you could drive up to the foyer, the entrance area, the where the courtyard is, in your car. You could then depart your car, get straight onto the ramp, and get into the foyer. The turning bay, which we talked about, the access is there to be used not just for delivery vehicles, but can be used by people who, for instance, dropping off relatives. So that is something that is achievable. The only thing they can't do is park there permanently.
Can we go back to that picture?
Sorry,
Jen.
Yeah.
Can we go back to that? I think it's 3 or 4 slide, 3, 3rd or 4th. Can we see that slide just to see the excess and the bicycle parking? Thank you.
Just bear with me. I'll just share the screen.
Thank you.
So the cycle store is to the right, as you see that on in a linear fashion.
Sorry, can you highlight that, please?
Yeah.
Yes, it's follow the line that says B, and it runs through the middle of the cycle storage area.
It's a big space.
Do you see that? Do you want me to point it out to you on the screen?
Yes, please.
You look on the meeting invite, it would be if you look in the appendix that's been given, it's on there. So I wanted to see it close up.
So this is
Yeah, okay.
this is 31 units, isn't it?
32.
32
This
units.
is the cycle bay.
Wow.
This is the turning bay. This is the bin storage area. There are also bin storage areas within the side of the turning bay. The turning bay is oversized.
So what happens if there's, with 32 units being put in there,
21.
Raise your hand.
it's quite conceivable that there's going to be quite a number of deliveries coming in. Oh, sorry, quite a number of deliveries coming in each day, and they could conceivably easily come at the same time. So you've got two Amazon type delivery lorries coming in. Where do they park?
Well, what we have in the planning conditions is an on-site management plan. And basically that's condition 20. So what we will require from the applicant are precise details of when these deliveries would take place. Of the 5 ground floor retail units, 3 of which are serviced from Goswell Hill, 2 of them serviced from Peascod Street. There is a designated time where the shops on Peascod Street have deliveries, and it becomes an access point when the pedestrians aren't there in the mornings, early in the morning. So 3 of the new bays will require deliveries, and the timing of those deliveries will be something that we will manage to ensure that they don't all arrive at once, as you suggest.
So what time are deliveries going to be committed from?
We can regulate it. That would be part of the management plan.
You could have deliveries coming, for example, from 6:30 in the morning through to 11 o'clock at night or something like that.
I think this is governed by the town centre rules. Isn't
Yes.
There's a lot of rules in the town centre about who can
It's only
deliver
9
what,
o'clock.
which kind of protected by bylaw and stuff. Isn't
Yeah.
it? So I think there's already protections there, Councillor Sharp.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Deliveries, yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I think we may be talking about 2 slightly separate things here. If I understood Councillor Sharp's question, it was more about private deliveries for the service departments, which could be Amazon or whoever, basically turning up whenever, and probably just driving up and turning. I think that the retail delivery is more straightforward in the Peascod Street.
Yeah.
You can deliver, I think it's 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 5 p.m. to a little bit later in the evening. So the retail delivery, I think, is governed by what's currently on Peascod Street, I would say, and then the specific access up Goswell Hill. The question about private deliveries to the apartments with the likes of, the online shopping, that would be, I think, I'd be interested in the answer to that one.
Yeah.
Do you think that could ever be controlled or legislated? I don't think it can.
I think part of the answer is the nature of the use. That these aren't C3s. So this is not a residential dwelling house where somebody's going to stay for perpetuity. These are C1 hotels. So we're expecting the transitory nature of guests. One hopefully would imagine that they don't have too much demand for deliveries, etc. Given they're obviously within the town centre where a lot of shops where they might buy things are actually on the doorstep. But there may be an occurrence where an individual requires something of that nature. That we could put that as part of the management plan. So if condition 20 part A, management of the property and how any management issues will be addressed. So if you so wished, you could say to us, deliveries, I mean, if we can pass the 6 planning condition tests, which would be difficult in that instance, but I think my top answer would be that we wouldn't expect a proliferation of deliveries from the users of the hotel.
Sorry.
I think also, you all know that there are lots of hotels in the vicinity, and you need to ask yourself, have you seen a proliferation of Amazon vans and so forth outside the hotels, other than deliveries that are already agreed for the hotel itself? I think it's about where's the pattern, as Nick explained. There isn't an expectation that this would really happen in something like short stay apart hotels, but we can't necessarily totally prevent it from happening. And we will endeavour to try and tie it through the management plan, but it's not guaranteed. It just, there is not a history or a pattern of this happening with this type of land use.
Councillor Buckley next.
Yes, if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to come as two parts. One is to just question the presentation by the officer, and the second part is to bring in my points on scale and access. If that's okay. But the first point I'd like to make is just for some background for the members here. We get 8.5 million visitors to Windsor every year, and I think we're the second highest destination point in the UK outside of London. We only have 500,000 of those visitors stay overnight. So me personally, I'm very much up for hotel space and accommodation to boost our local economy. So that was just some background information if people weren't aware of that, and that's why. But what I'd like to come back on two parts. First, I'd like to discuss with the officer the two statements that he made in his presentation. One is the hotel opposite, which is the existing hotel. I'd like to understand the scale of that to the existing proposal, because you're making reference, is a reason for consideration, is there is a hotel opposite, and I want to understand the scale of that hotel to this one that's being proposed.
Nick, if we can take us up.
Yeah, part of the reason I mentioned that was because I had slight concerns, as you may have picked up in the report, that there would be a loss of light to the neighbouring properties. So because of the increased scale, we looked into the light levels for those buildings immediately opposite. Yes, they're habitable rooms, but it is a hotel. So the dark blue rectangle is the length of Goswell House Hotel. So if we look at this slide, the top of the screen there, the first floor, second floor and third floor is all part of the hotel. I rang the hotel actually the lead up to this to just get their views, and they informed me exactly that, that all the rooms above the ground floor are theirs. In terms of how many, I can't tell you exactly how many, but from what I looked on their website, there looked to be at least over 10. And it's a high-end hotel.
Okay, so it's about 50% the size is of that hotel to the new one that's being considered from scale point of view.
Yeah, if we're talking at 21 on the host site, and if we're taking the assumption there's 10 next door, then yes, 50% bigger.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Second point of your statement is you made reference to 1,557 car park spaces adjacent to the hotel which would be available. Can you tell us how many cars need to fit into Windsor during the course of a day to fit into those 1,557 spaces? Because it's all right saying you've got spaces there, but we need to understand how many are actually available in a day, if any are, or is there over a capacity car parking requirement for Windsor at the moment anyway? My point is, you make a statement in your presentation, but you haven't given us the counter argument in regards to the usage that's needed, and I'm pretty confident it's well over capacity, and there's a massive shortfall car parking in Windsor. But I might be wrong. But if your presentation is that we've got more enough space in Windsor to accommodate everyone that needs to visit, then great. Is that the case?
If you could.
Well, thank you, Councillor Buckley. On this point, to provide that figure, I simply added them up. So if you look at this slide, where they are at the top of each box tells you how many spaces. So that's how I came up with that figure. There are 6 shown on that slide, but that is not the only provision in Windsor. There are more car parking spaces that are not shown, but I'm just showing the ones in close proximity, given that they're obviously within walking distance. With the wider question of how many parking spaces are needed, I can't give you that answer because I simply don't have that input. But what I can say is that the Highway Department have not objected to this application on lack of parking provision. So I'm guided by the statutory consultancy in that regard. They have no objection.
Can I come back on that, Chairman? Would it be up to highways to specify that in regards to car parking requirement? I've not come across that before, but you would normally find that in a statutory reference back, would you, as highways would be responsible to say there's enough car parking in a town centre?
Yes, highways were specifically interested in the lack of provision of parking, and they are the ones who made the judgment that they saw that there was ample provision locally.
Is it, well, there's difference between the use, if it was residential, there's prescribed amount of spaces. Maybe,
They would take a different view if it were C3 residential, yeah. Whether they would have the same view, I couldn't tell you, because the location itself is really sustainable. It's right near the station, within, a couple of minutes walk of the station. And it's in the town centre with other public transport accessibility there. But they've treated it as C3, C1 rather, which is a hotel type use. And the requirements for those are different, if that helps. I understand what you're saying about car
my
parking
queries, I'm
provision.
just asking it to understand how.
Yeah, and also hotel use tend to operate, the parking need tends to operate at different times. So they tend to be, the need is usually overnight rather than during the day.
Yeah.
So when it's used is different
If
to how it is used for shopping
I think
generally.
if someone's explored it, and I just usually going back, my point was, if you're making a statement in the presentation that it would appear there is enough, I'd like to understand that there was, because I understand living and visiting Windsor every day, there is a shortage, but as you say, probably more during the day. But yeah, so as long as it's been covered, that's fine. So there are my 2 points on the presentation, and that brings me to my points regarding the application. And one of them, I'll go straight back onto parking, because there was areas at the back of the existing facility where there is parking now, and obviously that's disabled parking even. Okay, I didn't know that. There's disabled parking at the rear of the property which would be lost, and obviously, I have concerns that in regards to parking and visitors coming into Windsor and our local economy, in regards to all that being taken into consideration. So I have concerns about that, and no parking for hotels, I have a concern period with that, because whatever happens, if they stay overnight or whatever, we still need parking. So my main concern is on parking. Second point is in regards to the loss of natural light, which is really one that you just brought up, Nick, in regards to the loss of light down Goswell Hill. And it's clear to me that, especially on the second part of development, when you look at the height from the northeast elevation, you were looking at and you said you had concerns, and one of your concerns were the existing loss of natural light to the buildings opposite. Some of those buildings, I think, are listed anyway. And that was my other concern, is really if those buildings, particularly lower down, at the moment you've got a restaurant there, you've got the hairdressers, you've got all different amenities down the bottom, and you've got the hotel access, you've got a cobbled street, and if that was to become much darker in regards to the loss of natural light, that has a concern to me. So I don't know how you've said you've done some tests in regards to the natural light. Has it passed that?
can you address that, Nick?
Yes, it's passed the test in relation to impact on habitable rooms. With regards to on the street level itself, I think it's the right thing. If I just share my screen, so it probably shows it better.
I think it was the north, just to help you, it was the northeast elevation, I think was the one.
I think this slide's quite interesting because there's already in situ a fairly over-dominant built form. So building at the bottom, the existing, that's what we currently have. What is proposed in the narrowest section, i.e. where the image that you see in the bottom right there, is at the top screen. So what we've got is a new shop front window as part of the Peascod Street elevation, timber framed. We've also got 2 additional windows to replicate the fenestration on the other side of the street. We've got lanterns. There is if you like, a second floor, but that is hit slightly away from the street scene. So I don't believe that the impact would be significantly greater, up to the point where you see the 3 doors, the ground floor. That effectively is where the new built form takes place. So where you've got the valley gutter roof, where you've got the decorative string course, it's actually a jetty nature. So if I point it out, that is where the new development or the new scale and massing of this building will take place. But when you look at the elevation of the actual images, the road widens at that point. It splays, not hugely, but it certainly splays from the narrowness of the image that you see there. That's the narrowest point. So it's a matter of planning judgment, really, as to whether you think that built form is going to be overly impactful on the immediate neighbours. And in this regard, we've concluded that it is, on the grounds that, as I say, the buildings, there's the image there I'm looking for there. So top right, you see road widens. There's already existing built form there. The image in the bottom right with the blue line, that shows the new building line. So the blue line where it's would be the new building line. The existing on the left-hand side, obviously the darker brown is the existing built form. So we're not talking about a huge projection of scale and massive from what is already there. It's relatively modest, and it's very suitably designed for its location in officer's opinion.
Okay, if I can come back on that, Chair. Yeah, I thought, as I said, if you go onto the northeast elevation slide, that was the one that I probably picked up on. And my understanding is we are going up at least 1 story on the front element. It then drops down in the middle and then comes up at the back. So it's the northeast one I had. No, if you keep going through, it says northeast at the top. So I just worked it. Yeah, northeast elevation. Yeah. So you've got the front piece at the forefront by Peascod Street. It's got an upper level on top, which obviously will restrict certainly light going down to the ground floor of the cobbled street. Then it then drops into the middle, and as you said, there is a turning point as well, which I could see on the previous map, which actually gives you good access to light and still drops down to the floor. But if you're actually stating that this is past all of the loss of natural light tests, as far as you're concerned, or is it just down to the judgment that you don't think it does, or it does? Sorry, because it's clear to me it's higher elevation, therefore you're going to have a loss of light. And I know no one lives down the bottom there, but this is a significant cut through. I'd say it's one of the most significant cut throughs from Peascod Street to the centre of the station, and is used by a huge number. I won't even want to put the number of thousands of pedestrians every day who go down that cobbled street. And obviously, if there is a concern with a loss of light, even though it doesn't possibly affect residential properties that we're used to, it is a natural light into that area, and I have concerns if there's lost light or not. That's it really, basically. If there is, then I think that's a concern.
Just to clarify, is your concern regarding loss of light for the pedestrians?
Yes, and the properties that are at the...
And the hotel opposite?
Yeah, so the hotel I can see will have a loss, but I think what the officer's saying is that sort of hotel is insignificant to a point, because it will have a loss, because if you put an extra floor on top, you're going to have a loss of light coming in from that
It
area.
will have an impact.
Yes, that's
right.
what I'm saying.
And I
Yeah.
don't think any of us are disputing that.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think really the key thing here is, and I think with the hotel, there is a kind of balancing exercise because, you know, there is an increase in height on that gate on the end, on the side wall. In terms of, you know, protecting amenity for passers-by, there isn't any planning policy to do that. There's no grounds for it. So I hear what you're saying, but it isn't as if it's going up, you know, several stories. It's in effect one story higher than the existing building. So, and even then, each side of it is, because it's a mansard type roof, it slopes on either side as well. So I hear what you say, but there isn't a policy we can use to protect passers-by.
Okay, that's fine.
Can we,
I've got
pass it round?
I've got a few other points that are scale and access, which are just like that being me done then. So you've covered the cut throughs, you've covered that. Access during development, obviously that's another one of my concerns, because again, I've just stated it's a massive cut through for people. So what considerations and conditions are put in place to protect pedestrian access cutting through, or are we going to lose all of that cobbled street accessing from Peascod Street to the other side, which will have a massive effect on local businesses, but also pedestrians cutting through? Will that be maintained as part of the conditions in the development?
Nick, if you'd like to reply.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Yes, there is a construction management plan planning condition, and that is number 11. So that will ensure that adequate provision is made for pedestrians. On the on that particular area, we're not talking about whole-scale demolition as such. It's a redesign of the existing, and therefore, yeah, there will be those occasions, but naturally there will be those occasions where there will be activities taking place in and around that junction, but that would be governed by the construction management plan. I mean, if it needs to have a banksman, for example, leading people through, if there was the upper floor being constructed, then that would happen. But I would imagine with parish fencing and suitable sheeting, etc., there should be no issue during the construction.
Okay. One of my last points now is just protection of the cobbled street. Obviously, you've said it's a non-heritage point next to the listed buildings, but obviously it's cobbled street, which I don't know the date it was installed, but it's pretty significant. There's protection being put in place regarding the loss or damage to that. Will it be protected? Is there conditions in there to make sure that it's put back to how it was before the development? Or will we lose any of the cobbled streets?
And what the tie-ins are.
It's a very good suggestion, Councillor Buckley. There isn't a specific planning condition that says a survey of the cobbled street before development and a survey of the cobbled street post development. However, that could be something that we could introduce as a planning condition.
Yeah, okay. I hate cobbled streets personally. We just had a comment about high heels, but I'm just thinking from an aesthetics point of view, access, and from the history, it's so important, that part of the town centre.
Nick, as he's just suggested, can add a condition onto that. But I'd also point out that it's highways land, and I think they would be pretty peeved if their cobbles, the sets that are used to create that effect in the street would be damaged, and they'd be looking for replacement like for like. So we can pick it up by a condition, and we can pick it up with highway authority. So if that helps reassure you that we can make sure that it remains in good condition.
If it's in the
because I don't think
condition,
any of us would be happy if they damaged it and didn't repair it. So
if it's in the condition, I'd be happy. The situation is that I don't rely on highways or someone going. I've seen so many different entrances around the area that should have been checked when they were done as a development, haven't been. I don't really want to rely on their ability to go back. But as a condition, then that gives us
So
something to
we'll
go
tie
back.
it in with the
Yeah.
conditions, so that
Yeah.
there's a requirement to check before and after,
Yeah.
and then we can highlight the highways
Thank you,
through under their regulations to get it repaired properly.
thank you.
If it
I
happens.
think that kills me off.
I think
Sorry,
Councillor
Chair.
Carpenter's been waiting.
Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Teasey's been waiting longer.
I think you were really, no, mate.
Thank you, Chair. I think this just, it's a general point, and it's, can I just ask about the layout of this room again? Because I've been waiting the best part of an hour here. And this isn't the first time that I think where the chair is over there, and I'm sort of several things down. It's not your fault. It's happened with other chairs as well. There's just something to be aware of and maybe consider that maybe, or maybe just that actually. Yes, but I don't get to choose where I stand. Okay, right. Thank you. I really appreciate some of the points that have been made thus far. My overall thought is that there is actually a lot of that supports this application. I think that there's a lot that's good about it. I think the fact that there've been no objections, I think that the conditions are very good ones and very on the conservation side. Actually, when you look at the Peascod Street the view, I actually think it improves it somewhat. I think that I know that we have to call these things less than sort of lower end of less than substantial harm or something like that. But that's that sort of planning speak, I think, for actually it's not too bad at all. Sorry, I'm not putting words into your mouth, but that's actually what it means. But actually, there is a lot that I think the situation that we are in is it is where it is, that it is on a slope. I have one real worry about this. Hopefully, they are dealt with in the conditions, but I am not sure, and I would like to ask for clarity over a couple of points, and they both relate to noise. So, as the officers pointed out, the area is the nightclub area. This is the key bit of town, the main bit, really now almost, I think, almost mainly the only bit now that the other bit, attics, closed, where there are the nightclubs, and there are the ones that were pointed out on picture. There are other ones that are further down, all the way down to Park on Plaza. I know it's not a nightclub, but this is where people go to in the evening. And when you look at the area around it, actually, it's probably reasonable, because it is residential. It is not residential. It is commercial. It's there's there are the shops, and because of the layout of the buildings, actually the noise is sort of channeled a bit. It's channeled quite nicely, so it's a good place for that to happen. I would note how in Maidenhead, and I'm doing this anecdotally because I've only been a councillor for a year, but in Maidenhead there has been a recent change to the layout of the town, whereby the area that was the nightclubby area in the centre of town is now less so, and there was a club that we understand, I think called Smokies or Smoky Joe's, which has closed down, and one of the reasons apparently why it's closed down is because there were complaints, noise complaints, because this is now becoming a residential area. Now, if we choose as a council to turn an area that is currently a nightclub area and say we don't want that anymore, then that's a decision we should be open about. My worry is that that happens by stealth, by us accidentally approving something that creates residential, so residential units in an area that is not appropriate for residential units, and that then at some subsequent point they complain, possibly reasonably, about noise, and that eventually that nightclub area closes. Now, I would rather that doesn't happen by stealth. If we choose that that's what we want to happen, then fine. But I personally think that the nighttime economy, so long as it is contained, is a good thing. Now, there are two aspects. I think the noise itself, I'm happy with the conditions 9 and 10. I think that in terms of the fabric, making the windows shut, but it would be good to just check with officers about what they think there. My main worry is about the use, and I suppose we could talk about C1. Now, I know I've been talking residential broadly. C1 use, I understand, is not it's not a sort of ordinary residential, it's hotel, sort of hotels essentially. I see in condition 18 that we have this thing about, well, no one can be there for more than 11 months. Question 1, how enforceable is that? Question 2, how easy is it to change condition from C1 or to C3? Can it be done without coming back to us? Because if it can, I'm worried. I'll leave it there. That's my main concern with this.
Just a reminder that it is a C1 application at the moment, not residential. So that's kind of, I get the concern, but it's not what's in front of us. Can we have some clarification about that? Certainly, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? The change of use subsequent to the application and build.
Thank you, Councillor Tizzy. Noise is obviously a very sensitive topic for a multiple number of uses locally, and we have legislation in the MPPF, licensing that works alongside that as a separate form of legislation. But the MPPF makes it very clear that the age, as I said, I mentioned it during the report, the existing premises and facilities should not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them as a result of a development permitted after they were established. So that's quite categorical, and therefore I don't see any reason why the local authority would be unduly restrictive for those existing operations in that area. This is a C1 use as a hotel, so ultimately, if people are not entirely content with their stay, they could obviously leave a negative review, they could leave the hotel to stay somewhere else, so on and so forth. But we don't think it will come to that because the noise report is very comprehensive. They've provided some excellent assessments as to insulation to ensure those rooms are adequately quiet. And that report has actually been verified by a fellow in that field with 30 years experience. It's in the appendix. He's written, if you like, a 6-page addendum summary in agreement with the conclusions in that noise report. Totally independent of the applicant, signed his name. You can check him out in the internet. So we've got a lot of reassurance, and also our environmental health protection officer has gone through the detail and also agreed that we are effectively looking at a scheme that can be built in this location without having an impact on the existing resident nightclub uses nearby. With regards to C1, how well can we manage the control of the building to restrict its use to C3? Well, number one, we've taken away permitted development rights for anything other than C1 use. With regards to no individual staying there for more than 11 months, I mean, that is a possibility if that happens, but we would have access to the register. They would have to keep a register, and we can view that register at any time. So we are, as a local authority, have the resources as well, the enforcement resources, to ensure that, if you like, the operations are being managed properly there, and people aren't using it as a formal place to stay.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think that from my point of view, on the first point, you really really reassured me. I think in terms of the noise impact itself, I suppose, and the fact that is it the national planning policy framework that is has this idea of this was here first. That's one of the rules, and the independence of that report that I wasn't quite sure about that. I'm still you've raised something that I hadn't seen and perhaps I missed it about this is on the second point, which is the one that worries me the most, and actually to me it's the only thing that worries me. I think everything else I'm relatively comfortable with, but I think is it condition 18, have I just not read it right, or is it another condition or something else? So I can see that, yes, this is C1 use, but you said permitted development rights have been taken away. Can you just explain what that means? Does that mean they can't change it to C3 without asking us and putting another application in? Or does it mean that, you know, they can't do what we would call permitted development, which would be in the normal course, you know, the normal course of what many people can do, again, without coming back to us, coming back to officers? Is that what it means? And could you just point to chapter and verse just to give me reassurance, as it were?
Thank you, Chair. Just to give clarity, I was just checking with Nick, I thought this was the case. The C3 use is tied into the legal agreement as well as through conditions, if that provides you with some reassurance. C1, sorry. Slip of the tongue that we definitely don't want to go with. So yeah, it has to retain as C1. Were we to receive an application to change that, or to vary the 106, and perhaps vary the condition, well, do a section 73 on the condition, then in any event, there's 21 units there, so it would need to come before you in any event. So come what may, you would see it. So if that's any reassurance, just as an aside, this is the amenity levels and everything else of this application have been considered as a hotel, not as a residential. It's unlikely to meet the requirements for residential. So just, I don't know if that reassures you. We can't prevent some, you know, things changing in the future and for that application to come forward. But I hope that gives some reassurance on where we are today. If it's okay with you, Chair, I was just going to step in quickly as an overarching thing, and I know everyone wants to ask questions, but I thought I should really have done this after Nick did his presentation, but we moved into the speaker and debate quite quickly. So I'm just going to mention that you may all be aware of this already, but we had a new MPPF published on the 12th of December this last year, so it's all very new. It's taken us a little bit of time to work through all the requirements of it, but in terms of development management, I think one of the key changes to keep in mind is that we're now back into tilted balance. Some of you may recall this from the past, but this is where we are. The fact that we have an up-to-date plan no longer protects us from tilted balance because we do not have a 5-year housing land supply. So we're back into tilted balance, and for decision-making purposes, I just got a little summary up here to help clarify things. So basically, it requires us to approve development proposals that accord with an up-to-date development plan without delay. And I think sitting at the heart of it is that our starting point is that we should be looking to approve all schemes unless there's any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework, so taken as a whole. So it's just a reminder for everybody here. We're hoping to do some more work with you on this going forward, but lots and lots are going on in the background. But I just wanted to remind you because it's changed since last committee. Sorry, Councillor.
So just to make sure I've heard it right, because we have a lack of housing, we have to give weighted tilted balance, he said, to non-residential applications.
It's all decision making. All decision making is affected by tilted balance. So the starting point is approve unless.
I
head.
thought hotel accommodation didn't count.
Until
It's not residential, it's not housing. So
it's development proposals, so it's,
we would have it in Windsor when it counts up all the hotel
Yeah.
beds. We would need to build another house. We wouldn't, would we?
Yeah.
tilted
What we've
balance is
got-
how we approach planning applications per se, so it's not just residential, it's everything. So it's based on the 5-year housing demand supply that we don't meet it, but when tilted balance kicks in, it kicks in on everything.
We should start counting everything, don't you?
I know.
Together.
Thank you, Chair.
Have we finished there? I do apologise.
No, thank you. It's, I think, just two quick points. The first thing is, I think it'd be useful to have something about this tilted balance, because that does seem rather odd, that it applies to things that are not residential when, based on a residential requirement. But that's for another day. The only other thing I would say is, leaving that all aside, as I said, that I'm satisfied, actually personally, read these things now. I think there's a lot to credit this with. This is a hotel, as Councillor Buckley said at the very start. We need hotels, and this is bang in the right location. It's right in the centre of town. And yes, I mean, in fact, let's just go out there now. I would put the proposal to go with officer recommendations and accept this. Why not?
Thank you. I think where are we down the line? I think Councillor Carpenter was up next.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, most of my questions have already been answered, so thank you, everyone, for doing that. Just a couple of comments there. I mean, these are service departments, right? So we keep talking about a hotel. People generally aren't just going to stay there 1 or 2 nights. They'll probably stay there for, a couple of weeks. There'll be mainly business people. So there will be a lot of deliveries, because there'll be Deliveroo and Just Eat and things like that. So I know that you said there won't be, but there will be, because a lot of these people will be business people, and they will need probably to have a vehicle, because I mean, I know I had a lot of colleagues that used to stay in Windsor and they went to Langley. Our transport network is rubbish, and you can't get very easily from Windsor to Langley unless get a taxi or a car. So, I do worry about where they're going to park their cars, because they won't be able to afford to park in Windsor for 2 weeks. So they'll be parking it somewhere in a residential street or something like that, and that will cause other issues. But I just want to make that point. We are talking about service departments rather than just another hotel. It is different. I work in the travel industry, so and it's mainly business people that would probably want to use those. It might be, people want to stay in the service department over a weekend and things like that as well. But the target audience is going to be a business person, and yeah, I'm also concerned about the comment about the tilted balance, but I'm happy with the proposal generally, apart from the lack of disabled parking particularly, and accessibility to it, but it looks an improvement on what's there now. Right. So thank you.
And if I can get everybody one go first, then come back. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I also see it as a massive improvement. That land was just empty space, bins, cars and dirt, frankly, and also the improvement to the Peascod's facing side as well. Peascod needs a real mix of buildings, and this is one of the lesser ones we're going to improve. We've heard comments about cycling, parking, deliveries, but I think most have been addressed. Wheelchair access is tricky, because you have to wheel up Godswell Hill until the tarmac meets pavement. It's not ideal, but there's nothing really can be done unless we were to just destroy a building to make a large disabled access ramp, which isn't going to happen, obviously. I see, as long as we have a condition in the care matters from Councillor Buckley's comments, I'll be willing to second Councillor TT's motion.
Thank you. So that's where we stand at the moment. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a few comments really. I think there's maybe a question or two. Certainly agree with the point. This is in the heart of Windsor, and I think it does enhances the look. The provision of the service departments, provides more more accommodation, more people in this heart. And I guess in terms of cars, my view would be this is not a particularly car location. It's very much pedestrianised, and cars need to be accessed. But I think the target audience here, and it's only 21 people is sort of something other than cars, whether it's trains or businesses or you know, people coming in from abroad and staying. The appearance is definitely an improvement. I think my concern is around the sort of the expectations of the use relative to the nightclub. So, as Councillor Teasey said, this is the one spot in Windsor where we have you know, a critical mass of bars and clubs. There are 4 adjacent bars, and then there's the Labyrinth nightclub. So this is a really important spot for bringing young people and driving the economy, that nighttime economy in Windsor. There is precious little for young people, so I think it's quite important that this is protected by you know, by the planning framework. I guess I want to test the comments around I think it's the NPPF paragraph 200. Existing businesses and facilities should not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them. And obviously the nightclub capacity is around 500 people, the Labyrinth, which is directly opposite. So I'm just thinking, if 500 people are kind of moving in and out around 2 or 3 a.m., you know, is that adequately managed? Does dropping this this development in there, it restricts the pavement space. I think the area that's currently there is used as a smoking area, and obviously 500 people coming out. If we build, that's quite a narrow passage on the hill for that number of people. So I'd just like to sort of test that piece about the impact on existing businesses a little bit. Don't know if planning officers can comment on, you know, how can we guarantee that, you know, there aren't going to be a flurry of complaints about noise at 2 a.m. on a Friday, when it's actually that's entirely reasonable, because this is the centre of town, this is the heart of town, and we protect those, you know, those clubs and their business.
I think, you know, I will comment that by the nature of the application, it's, you know, it's a commercial decision, isn't it? If people don't like the noise, they want to stay there. I think there is that element there, but it's a buyer's market, isn't it, really? It's not as if it's residential, you know, where, you know, people would expect, you know, well, maybe they book it because it's got the nightclubs 2 steps away. Anything to add to that? We're going around for the second round now. I think it was Councillor Costa.
Thank you, Chair. I just really, when I look at this as a whole, it looks good. The layout looks good. The front on the Peascod Street looks good. But I have to think, is the fact that we are not making provision for people with disabilities, is that enough to tilt the balance? And that's a question that I need to ask, because you know, people with disabilities want to go out and have fun toes. I can assure you of that. So, but we are very reliant on our cars. So, and quite often are able to use public transport the same way that people that don't have mobility issues. So, I just want to know whether, as officers, whether that would be enough to tilt the balance, and if it isn't, then how do we put the message out to future applications that we are not a town that will be prejudiced against disabilities? Thank you.
Yes, Louisa.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is always a bit of a balance in terms of meeting the needs of those that have mobility challenges and the development itself. What I would say is, as Nick's mentioned already, there's already proposals to create level access to the building. There would be lifts inside for access to the units themselves. So in terms of accessibility, it would already sort of meet disability requirements in terms of the premises itself. As you're talking about here, it's about actually getting to it in the first place. And that is limited by the site in its own right. So I think really that there is ability to access it by vehicle, just not the ability to actually park on the site. So if there are people that are mobility challenged, they can use the premises. They may be able to access it by specialist taxi or other mobility provision. But in its own right, to be able to drive there as mobility impaired and park on the site, it would not lend itself readily to that, and that I understand. In terms of the balance, some of the mobility provision is available, but not all of the provision that you're referring to. And it may be that other premises might be more suitable if somebody wants to be able to use their own vehicle, especially if that vehicle is adapted. But in terms of tilted balance, there are a lot of benefits that the scheme is bringing forward, and it's meeting some of the requirements that we've talked about. So I think the lack of actual parking on the site for disabilities would not be sufficient to meet the tests that I mentioned earlier, which I just set out here, which is from the RTPI, from the Royal Town Planning Institute, which has to significantly and demonstrably demonstrate how it's outweighing the benefits. And tilted balance that's a difficult and very high test to meet. And I don't think the lack of a disabled parking space would meet that test. And I do understand where your concerns are, because I completely, empathise with where you're coming from, but I just don't think it would meet the tilted balance test here. I'm not sure there's anything more I can add really, because as I say, in its own right, the building itself would be sufficient.
Nick, something to add?
Yes, sorry, I'd just like to add to that as well, if I may, Councillor Costa, is that obviously we talked a lot about the C1 use and the access, and yes, I think we all accept it's regrettable that there isn't a dedicated parking space for disabled visitors. But I think part of the viability and vitality argument, before you make up in your own minds whether this balance is out or not, is also the 3 new shops. So we've got 2 existing shops. So there is a courtyard being created at the ground floor, which also doubles up as the entrance to the C1 uses above. But there are going to be 3 new shops. One is proposed to be a restaurant. And so it's not just about provision of a hotel, it's actually going to become part of the shopping precinct in the area, whereas as it stands at the moment, it is an eyesore. Perhaps the images didn't show it as accurately as it is, but there's lots of if you like unsavoury behaviour going on there. So from our perspective, that's how we're balancing this against that harm we've identified.
Can I just come back and just say thank you very much for that? That helps me work things out in my head. If it had fewer cycle spaces and one disabled space, I would be jumping up and down and dancing if I could. But we do need to put out this message that to people with disabilities that we are not a town that's going to exclude them.
I think it was Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Yes, I quite like this development. I think it looks quite nice and it seems to add benefit to the town. What I'm concerned about though is with the increase in height and the fact that it's an entertainment centre in that area. You've got 2 or 3 nightclubs on. Are we creating dark spaces in the pathway out along Goswell Hill that's going to be potentially a dangerous place for people, or are we having additional street lighting in that area to make sure that it's well lit when people are leaving nightclubs and that sort of thing? Because I'm concerned that dark spaces when people are leaving nightclubs could potentially be dangerous areas, and with that additional height, which is obviously loss of light, and obviously at night time, is that a problem?
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. It's a good question. And as part of this application, we've had a sit-down meeting with police, and the applicant was present, as was the architect. And we went through several iterations of the scheme to come up with the best possible solution, wherein the police were satisfied. And this includes the provision of CCTV and external lighting as part of planning conditions. But the design in terms of the turning bay, the cycle storage area, which is in a linear fashion, so there's no room to kind of hide behind corners or anything like that, has all been agreed with by the police department. But externally, the lighting issue, yeah, that is definitely going to be covered by a planning condition, and we're going to have the added benefit of additional CCTV in that location.
Just thinking about how scary it is to leave a nightclub with a bright light outside. Something most of us would like. Councillor Beckley?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get clarification. Councillor Tizzy made a proposal which was seconded by Councillor Davies in respect of putting in the condition of the protection of the cobbled street. Is that the proposal that was put forward, or is this another part of the proposal that was one?
It's already a heritage asset.
Just step in here. I'm really sorry because Nick and I just had a very quick conflict after we said what we'd said about the condition. It would need to go into the section 106 because rather than a planning condition, because the cobbles are actually outside the red line area. So in order to protect it, it needs to go into the 106. So we're more than happy to do it that way if you're satisfied, just as long as you include that in any decision.
Would that be acceptable for Councillor Tizzy to have that inserted in? I think, yeah.
Sorry, it was only really one. It's not a big point, but it is a big point in regards to planning. I speak to the police all the time, and what the officer just said there in regards to consultation with the applicant and the police is great to hear, because the police tell me that planning isn't taking into consideration their concerns all the time. It's great to hear that we are, and that CCTV and lighting is taken into consideration. Just want to make that point because it's very, very important, because we hear so often that we're doing planning applications and aren't really thinking about that side. We are. I think that's a very positive point. Thank you.
Thank you. I my little say, because I like to play old father time sometimes, but I'm probably the only person here who can remember the original pub that stood on site, which is the Star and Garter, which was actually extremely famous. It was where all the big boxers of the 40s and 50s were trained before boxing matches because of the sheer size of the site. It was a huge coaching inn with a huge back room, and it's actually where the Ricky Tick Club started in the 60s, the famous music club before it moved to various other venues. So it had a part of the history of the town, and I was far too young to go in there, obviously. But I always remember it looked very interesting. It's a Tudor building, it dated from Tudor times. And then we went away for a few years and came back, and it had been replaced by that. So I think anything that changes the facade on Peascod Street, which I think the outline design actually mirrors what was there years before. It's very much sympathetic with the streets here. And I agree with what people have said, notwithstanding we need to protect the nighttime economy. You know, it's getting battered everywhere, and Windsor still has a vibrant set of it. So I think the measures, and bearing that in mind, are actually really massively important. But also I think it will gentrify the area a bit, because ever since I can remember, the back there has always looked tatty and unloved, and you know, there's a fence wall knocked down, you know, cars used to get abandoned up there. And yeah, I think it will look better. I think it will improve the look of the area, and it will create a double-sided aspect down there rather than just everything on one side. So I'm personally, I think it's got its shortcomings, but I think in the scale of where it is and what it can provide for the town, I think it's a good application. So that's me having my say, playing old father time. As nobody else has got anything to add, we have one. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Chair, I just did a couple of specific questions. A couple of specific questions. Firstly, I noticed there are some gates on the turning bay, and I just wonder is there any details to how that will be managed, or do we how does that work? Because obviously at some point they have to be open and closed every day. Is that something that will be left to the management of the building, and tiling and all that sort of thing?
But that's one question. Secondly, is I know there's no SIL, no community infrastructure levy. There is a reference to 106. Well, can you run through what payments? I can see there's a carbon offset payment of 104k. Any other payments in terms of the sort of the environment and that kind of infrastructure piece. And then finally, just coming back to my point about the sort of the clubs and the noise control, could you just confirm that the noise assessment has said that whatever levels they've measured are acceptable for the time of day, being around like the order of 2 a.m. So I know we've got measures in the building to be insulated from noise, from aircraft noise. This is a very specific question for this location. So can you confirm if the noise assessment has deemed that acceptable? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So the gate question is partially covered with the on-site management. So those using that gate will be 3.5 tonne trucks, lightly or similar. They would need the agreement of the applicant through the management details, the management company, to have the code to open those gates that are foldable. And that will be, we don't have the details of that, we've certainly got that within both planning conditions number 20, and also it's within the heads of terms. So it becomes a matter of law. Once that section 106 is signed, that gives us the comfort that we can control the usage of those gates. With regards to SIL, this application isn't SIL liable, and we've got £104,000 for the carbon offset under the new SPD, new sustainability SPD. The figure is commensurate with other town centre developments, i.e. the 37%, which it achieved under Part L regs. Similarly sized developments have achieved that type of figure. So we have consulted with the sustainability officer on that. But with regards to other SIL provision, 106, we haven't requested anything other than those listed in the heads of terms, and that's not a monetary requirement for biodiversity net gain. Reinforcing the C1 use, we've upped that as part of the heads of terms, not just a planning condition, because obviously we'll be a signatory to the 106, and if we don't, so somebody says, well, we want to change this unit to a C3, you've got to have a deed of variation, you've got to change the legal agreement by a matter of law. We're obviously a signatory to that, so we wouldn't give our blessing unless we are content. So, but there aren't any other financial payments that we are requesting as part of this application. In terms of the noise, yes, the nightclubs down there, I've checked the nightclubs in terms of their opening hours. 3 o'clock is down as their finishing time, and the noise survey finished at certainly 3. It may have gone on to 3:30 from, I need to check the report, but it certainly went up to that time. So yeah, we are content that the findings of the conclusions, I was going to say sound, but are acceptable.
Thank you very much for those answers. Just one quick question. Can you explain why there is no SIL on this one? Sorry, just a bit of a training session.
Yeah, the SIL rates are listed in the, you got it? Yeah. They're listed within the website, the RBWM website, and that says for retail, wider other borough retail, and any other uses, there's a zero payment. So the reason for that is that is the way that the seal is structured. That this authority is predominantly geared towards residential. There is a provision for retail, but that is in certain instances, it says here borough-wide retail warehouses. But yes, interestingly, it says zero under the indexation seal charging or this location, which is other retail location and any other uses. So I'm only going on the guidance that we've issued on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we all debated everything out. I think it'd be useful if we can just suggest the wording for that condition for the 106 protection of the cobbled street, the historic street, so that Councillor Tizzy can add that to the proposal, maybe. That's acceptable. It's acceptable.
Yes, that's fine, Councillor. And I was penning something to that effect, and my draft wording would be survey of the cobbled street, Goswell Hill, and quite fortunately, I suppose the actual length of that cobbled street doesn't go more than about 80 metres. I think I said at the beginning the length of this site is 70 metres. So I've said the length of the cobbled street, so the entirety of it, not just the section that is immediately opposite the application site. So survey the cobbled street of Goswell Hill before and after development, running the length of the street must be undertaken. Any damage to the cobbled street must be made good with like-for-like replacements to the satisfaction of the local planning authority. This would need to be included as a clause within the section 106 agreement because it's outside of the red line.
A lot of words there. There's a lot of recommendation. So we do have a proposition to approve according to officer's recommendation with that condition, which I'm hoping. So we do have a recommendation to approve with the addition of that condition, which I do hope you've managed to jot down quickly.
I've had some help from our legal officer who would like to say something before we proceed.
And we have a second to that. So,
Can our legal officer say something, please?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
sorry. Sorry, Chairman. It was just to add to Nick's wording on that suggested addition to the section 106 to in the list of bullet points in the recommendation to ensure that the cobbled street, Goswell Street, is protected during and after development, and that any damage to the cobbled street is to be made good to the satisfaction of the local planning authority. The condition of the street will be surveyed prior to and after completion of the development. Just to add to the steps to protect it, that assists.
Proposition. All agreed.
Agreed.
Therefore, Tim, if we can go for the main vote. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a motion proposed by Councillor Teasy and seconded by Councillor Davies to grant planning permission on the satisfactory completion of an undertaking within 6 months from the date of a resolution to approve to secure the following: management company details, delivery and maintenance of site, footpath and pavement provision and maintenance, full details to be provided via the reserved matters landscaping application, carbon offset contributions totaling £104,076, biodiversity net gain, ensure C1 use at first floor and no persons to stay for more than 11 months of the year, And then we have the condition that our legal officer has just mentioned, which I can read out again. Please bear with me. So that is to ensure that the cobbled street, Goswell Street, is protected during and after development, and that any damage to the cobbled street is made good to the satisfaction of the LPA. The condition of the street will be surveyed prior to and after completion of the development. Okay, in addition, highway works through a section 278 agreement, including but not limited to the provision of a new pavement to the front of the site, new dropped curb at the access, and new dropped curb for wheelchair access. And this will be in addition to the conditions listed within section 11 of the report. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, I will now go to a named vote. Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Da Costa.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Teasy.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
Thank you. So that's unanimous. The motion is carried.
Thank you, everybody, for interesting part of quite a complex application. Really, we now move on to agenda item number 5, which is the planning appeals received and planning decision report. Note the contents of the report. Is it noted and we all agree that it's noted?
Noted.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes this meeting. Thank you very much for your time, and to our attendees for coming along. Thank you very much, officers. Yeah, sorry.